And now, it's time for learning more about our lives as students, our body as humans, and our future as happy, healthy people. The APU and AUV Podcast Network presents the Student Health and Happiness Podcast with your host, Russell Freeman.
Welcome to the AUV Student Health and Happiness Podcast. I'm Dr. Russell Freeman. I'm a professor of health science and philosophy at American University in Vietnam and a chiropractic physician from the United States. Today, we're going to take a closer look at fear, risk, and decision-making. Now, this is something that everybody does. Is we make choices all day long and every day of our lives. And most of us never really consider what it is that we make our decisions based upon. We just make what we think is the best decision for ourselves. But that's not really the best way to go about managing. So we need help today to understand on our journey how people do make the best decisions. And to help us with that, we have Mr. Michael Hayes, who is our student counselor and advisor here at American University in Vietnam. Michael, welcome to our broadcast today.
Hey, nice to see you again, Russell.
It's always good to have you back. So, Michael, today we're going to talk about fear and risk, and this is something that you and I have discussed a lot, both in relation to our students as well as just in life in general. Can we start by perhaps defining what fear and risk are? Let me rattle off a couple definitions here, and you can tell me if they need to be altered. As far as fear, the definition technically is an unpleasant emotion that's caused by the belief that someone or something's dangerous. It's likely to cause pain or a threat, and it's a feeling. It's a mental and a physical feeling sometimes. It's also a survival mechanism. And risk, on the other hand, is a reference to a probability. It's a probability of something you don't want to happen or an outcome that's unwanted, and it's an intellectual assessment. It's kind of the opposite of impossibility. Michael, how would you define and contrast fear and risk?
Well, I think you did a good job here, Russell. I would say that fear is one of those innate mechanisms that we all have going way back to when we first emerged from the primordial ooze, and fear is what keeps us going. It can act as a powerful motivator. It can force you to take a risk. It can allow you to take a chance. It can help you move away from, like you mentioned earlier, that possibility of danger and harm and physical danger. So there's always, two sides to the coin, and I think our students here at AUV need to take a lot more risk, and they do that by taking classes and building upon their English skills and preparing themselves for the future by studying here at AUV.
We're going to unwrap this concept of basically hosting fear and why students and others are afraid and how to mitigate that situation. We're going to do that a little later in the program. But I want to kind of start with about the fear that you can feel sometimes and not even know why. I've experienced this where sometimes I feel fear about something or someone or about I don't know what, and I don't know where it's coming from. What is that? Is that the same as intuition?
Or it's that anticipatory fear, that ruminating in your head that says, if I allow this situation to continue on, something bad is going to come of it. So I always talk with my friends, and particularly with students here at AUV and at APU, you need to walk through that fear. That's how you learn to overcome fear, is take a risk. And this is the environment that's really well designed to support those students who walk through fear. And if they happen to have a bit of failure along the way, the staff and faculty here at AUV and APU can prop them back up and get them back on the path again.
Now, I think that what you're thinking at the moment that you need to make a decision may not just be about things relevant to the decision. What I'm trying to say is that I guess I'm trying to ask you, can you make a wrong decision if you're in a bad mood or a situation is around you that's putting you in a not comfortable place? Does that spill over into your decision-making of other categories?
Sure, and I think a good example of that is one of the things I often tell young people in classes that I teach is, if you're going to send an email and you're angry or you're doing it out of fear or you're doing it out of a sense of retribution, maybe type in that email and then sit on it for 24 hours and look at it again in the morning and reevaluate the reason you're sending it and give yourself some time to cool off. Don't send it out of anger and animosity. That could put you in a more difficult position than if you just give yourself time to mull over the results of hitting the send button on that email.
I can think of 100 times at least that I had wished that I had waited and not sent a message out.
Exactly.
And then I had to send out 10 to make up for the one that I really didn't mean it. Yep. I was reacting to something different, but responding improperly because of it. And I think that this is a pitfall that everybody needs to be aware of that can happen. Sometimes you really need to, just like you said, you need to sit on it for a while.
Or just, hold off on that text message. Give yourself an hour to take a walk, focus on your breathing, talk to a friend, get a second opinion. What do you think about this text? Is this appropriate, or should I hold off and get some advice?
I have made it a personal policy over the last few years. If I have to send a negative message or I'm really having a problem with some situation and I write a message or I write a letter, something about it, I don't send it until the next day.
Yeah, that's a really good policy.
And I have saved myself a lot of problems by doing that. So maybe that's something that our audience would appreciate knowing. I'm going to ask you a personal question. I hope you don't mind, but in your personal life or in your professional life, just in your life, have you ever made any really wrong decisions? And what were the reasons for your making a wrong decision at the time?
Well, I've been really fortunate. I've lived a long life. I've taken on a lot of different opportunities, and I have made some big mistakes. And that's how you grow. My path has been pretty unique. I feel very blessed. I keep a strong sense of gratitude, and I'm very aware of where I am in my life stage at this point in time, and that my decision-making needs to be more grounded in being grateful for the things I have and the people I do have in my life, and try to spread more positivity as opposed to negativity.
In my particular case, I think my poorest decisions were made because of confidence imbalance. I either had too much confidence about something or I had too little confidence about it. And it affected my communication. So it really was about me. It wasn't about the issue. And again, that's sort of timing of when you write something and when you send it as well.
Yeah, and that confidence, like you said, it can be a very helpful tool. It can spur you on to new adventures, a new career path, a new whatever in your life. And I would always encourage people to take a risk. We're only here for a short time, and there's more opportunity with being a bit of a risk taker, in my view. What
are the three biggest risks that you are consistently hearing from students? Not risks, fears.
The biggest fears, the biggest three fears that you mentioned are going to be things around what do I want to study in the future? I don't know. I'm uncertain. How do I get some clarity on that? The other fear that often comes up is, am I prepared? Am I good enough? And I always remind students that, even if they're having that thought, they're already 90% there. They just need to take the action to cover that other 10%. And then lastly, we are all very blessed, whether we're here in Vietnam or somewhere else, and we want to continue to live the best life we can, and it involves taking risk.
So there are so many fears and risks in the world. I'd like to rattle off a couple of them and see if there's anything here that you really want to comment on. What I see here is the biggest fear is reputation, is loss of reputation.
Yep, very Asian.
And that has to do with people's respect and that sort of thing.
Yep.
The other things have to do about money, losing money, having no money. And strangely enough, if you conflate money and success, some people have a fear of success. They can't visualize themselves as successful, profitable people. And so they kind of shoot themselves in the foot saying, I can't do this.
Right.
Because they don't have the right picture of it. And the last thing is a fear of missing out. That is not just with students, this fear of missing out. Everybody's doing it. Everybody's running to the side of the boat. If I don't run quickly, I'm going to miss my chance. And I see this in the stock market with young investors, new investors, naive investors here, that they have a fear of missing out. And so they throw money they can't afford to lose into a situation. And of course, you know what happens. They lose the money.
Yeah.
So my last question is a really important one. So I'm going to need you to think about the answer and give it to us in our next part. And that has to do with how fear enters into the decision-making of most people and about risk tolerance. What's the difference between people who can tolerate risks and people that can't? So I'd like you to think about that. And at this moment, this concludes part 1 of our series, and I'd like to thank you for listening to the AUV podcast. We'll see you next time. Bye.